and Southern Iroquois. It is great to be here with you today. My name is David Sanders. My pronouns are he and him, and I am your worship associate for this morning. I'm also delighted to share that I am the chair of the solar project team for UUFC. Here at UUFC, we welcome all of those who come seeking a spiritual home among us. Whether this is your 100th time or your first time, if you happen to be a first-time visitor, we would love to get to know you. If you're here in person, please be sure to visit our welcome table just outside and join us at the end of the hall for social hour. If you're at home viewing us online, we would be happy for you to receive our newsletter by emailing our office or visiting us at the uufc.org so you can learn more about us. We have a few announcements this morning, quite a few, so I'm not going to be able to go through all of them. But on the back page of your order of service, there's a more complete list, not a fully complete list. But Saturday, March 1st, 9:30 to 4, there's a women's retreat, Finding Strength and Wisdom Within. Rosellen asks if you plan to attend, please register using the form that is linked in the weekly connection. She needs an accurate head count to ensure that she has enough food and supplies, and suggested donation for the event is $10. Are you curious about what membership means at UUFC? What does it mean to be a member? This is the place to start. Come and learn about our faith and our congregation on Sunday, March 2nd, noon to 2:30 for UU and U. Lunch will be provided. Please RSVP to admin at uufc.org and let us know if you need childcare or have any dietary needs. Contact Karen York or Nancy Johnson if you have questions. There are several opportunities to engage in public demonstrations in our communities in the coming weeks. There are several opportunities that I will not go through every one, but I will highlight a couple coming up soon. Seneca City Hall tomorrow, Monday, February 17th from noon to 1:30. This is part of the National Day of Protest with events happening all across the country. And then Anderson Commons Park downtown on Saturday, February 22nd, starting at 10 a.m. A couple of other announcements that I'll read off. Next Sunday after social time, there will be a watch party and webinar on the South Carolina legislative advocacy techniques. So please join us for that. And then after the service, if you have a couple of arms and legs and are willing to help move some stuff, it's just for about 5 minutes. Karen Hiebel needs some help after the service to move some of the RE materials upstairs into the attic. Now we have a reading. Reverend Holly.
Good morning. I am Reverend Holly Brown, and my pronouns are they, them, and I am the settled minister here at UUFC. I offer these as our opening words and call to worship this morning. Come one, come all. Come with your missing pieces and your extra screws. Come with your hard edges and your soft spots. Come with your bowed heads and your upright spines. Come with your flamboyant and drab, verbose and quiet, fidgeting and lethargic. All you with large vision and tender hearts. All you with small courage and tender fears. Bring your lisp and your stutter and your song. Bring your gravel and your drawl and your lilt. Bring your anger and your joy and your righteous indignation. Misfits and conformists and everyone in between. Come into this space and be welcome. Bring who you are. Bring where you've traveled. Bring what you long for, and let us worship together. And in this spirit of worship, I invite you to rise in body, mind, or spirit, wherever you are, to join in singing number 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. And we're going to do this 2 times through.
Now I'd like to invite Talia to come and light our chalice while we say our words of affirmation together, and they're printed in your bulletin. We gather together in a spirit of love, with justice as our guide. This is our chosen covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth with freedom, and to care for one another. And thank you, Talia. Now is our time for all ages, and I invite Karen Hiebel to come up and present.
This morning's story is Hello, Mr. Blue by Daria Peoples. When I stay with my papa, we walk to breakfast. If you can keep a secret, I'll tell you. Papa lets me sip his creamy, sweet coffee. After breakfast, we make music. Today, I meet Papa's friend. Mr. Blue lives outside. Papa says they go back. All the way back. They went through some weary days and some looking up days and some just gotta keep pushing days. Papa says all day long, for all his years, his friend has been playing, giving the gift of his music, a womp, a stomp, a too good not to move groove, a funky beat with an important word to speak. His music makes all the people in the street rise, march, and boogie. Papa says his friend is a working man, a moving man, a get-up-and-go kind of brother. But I have questions, lots of questions. Is he safe? Is he scared? Is he lonely? Is he cold? Is he wet? Is he hungry? What do you think's going on here? Hello, Mr. Blue. Please come inside with us. Mr. Blue is my favorite musician, and now he's my friend, too.
This is the time that we set aside in each service for our offering in order to give toward our community and the financial vitality of this fellowship. Also, 25% of the undesignated collection each week goes to an organization in the local community that we partner with. For the month of February, we're partnering with Ripple of One. Each week, also, we collect non-perishable food for the Clemson Community Cares Food Bank. You may also give by going to the UUFC website and by using the donate button. There you will see options for paying your pledge and donating towards the organizations that we partner with. Thank you for your generosity.
Well, we have a unique occurrence this morning. This is a time that we share of our joys and concerns with one another, a sacred sharing of connection and community. And some weeks, we have lots of joys and concerns, and some weeks, we don't have green slips that are turned in. And this happens to be one of those weeks. However, I do know that we have a member who is currently in the hospital after a car accident, so I'd like to place a stone for him. And I'd like to place a stone for many of our folks that are recovering from surgeries or illness here in our community. And for the state of the world. That might be more stones than we have. And one final stone for all of those joys and concerns that remain unspoken and more tender on our hearts this morning. And now is the time that we invite our children and youth that would like to go to religious education to go with Karen Hiebel and Karen Sanders this morning, and we'll sing the children out using Go Now in Peace. I now invite you into a spirit of prayer and meditation, maybe settling into your seat. If it's comfortable and you would like to do so, to close your eyes. Just be present for these words. You hardly knew how hungry you were to be gathered in, to receive the welcome that invited you to enter entirely. Nothing of you found foreign or strange. Nothing of your life that you were asked to leave behind or to carry in silence or in shame. Tentative steps became settling in, leaning into the blessing that unfolded you, taking your place in the circle that stunned you, with its unimagined grace. You began to breathe again, to move without fear, to speak with abandon, the words you carried in your bones that echoed in your being. You learned to sing. But the deal with this blessing is that it will not leave you alone, will not let you linger in safety, in stasis. The time will come when this blessing will ask you to leave, not because it has tired of you, but because it desires for you to become the sanctuary that you have found, to seen with your own eyes, known in your own heart that you are beloved, precious child of God, beautiful to behold, and you are welcome and more than welcome here. I invite you to move into a musical meditation with number 1009, the meditation on breathing, and I ask you to remain seated to continue that meditative feeling.
Now I'd like to share with you a reading by Reverend Dr. Judith Campbell. The title is Hospitality as a Spiritual Practice. When we speak of hospitality, we are always addressing issues of inclusion and exclusion. Each of us makes choices about who will and who will not be included in our lives. Issues of inclusion and exclusion, while personal, are not just personal. Our entire culture excludes many people. If you are in a wheelchair, for example, you are excluded because there are places you cannot go. If you are very young, if you are very old, you are excluded. Hospitality has an inescapable moral dimension to it. It is an issue involving what it means to be human. All of our talk about hospitable openness doesn't mean anything as long as some people continue to be tossed aside. But calling hospitality a moral issue does not tell us the whole truth about hospitality either. A moral issue can become bogged down in legalisms, and hospitality is no legalistic ethical issue. It is instead a spiritual practice, a way of becoming more human, a way of understanding ourselves. Hospitality is both the answer to modern alienation and injustice and a path to a deeper spirituality. From Benedict's Way of Love by Father Daniel Homan and Lonnie Gollins Pratt, A stranger is nothing more than a friend you haven't met, say some. My friend Sue would say her mother, say that of her mother. The woman has never met a stranger. She could welcome and make friends with a fence post. I knew that lady, and she really was truly and deeply a hospitable woman. The term radical hospitality is getting a lot of attention in churches and in our social welfare agencies these days as we, as a nation, are struggling with how to welcome or turn away the storm-tossed strangers who are waiting outside our borders, the homeless man or woman sitting on the church steps, or a family waiting in line at the food pantry. I believe as many people who are trying to practice what we profess, that we need to live into our hospitality, be it radical or gentle or somewhere in between. Anything from a welcoming smile to a dollar in the outstretched hand to a telephone call or letter to our lawmakers advocating for change is a step forward into lived hospitality. We are living in a time when the speaking or yelling snarky, nasty, vitriolic words has become commonplace. A time where we are encouraged by some to fear the stranger, bar the door, circle the wagons, and shelter in place against the outsider, the other, the differently abled, the person who doesn't speak or look or pray the way we are used to. We are better than that. We are better than that. We are better than that. How you live into your hospitality is your choice. All I ask is that you think back to a time when you felt like an outsider, where you felt unwelcome or shut out of something, where you felt profoundly different from the people around you, when you were alone somewhere and you didn't speak the language. Then you can live into your hospitality with compassion. Compassion, a feeling or virtue that comes from shared experience. As people of faith, we try to work to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. This means the person sitting next to you, the person serving you at the restaurant or in a store or in a gas station, the family at the border, the man or woman or child who speaks English differently or doesn't speak English at all, the new family in the neighborhood, whatever the color of their skin or the way they pray or do not pray. Speaking from an interfaith perspective, I can say that there is no wisdom or faith tradition in my understanding which tells us to lock the door and turn away the stranger. In a time when more and more of us are seeking a spiritual practice as a way to soothe our troubled souls, might I suggest we consider true hospitality as one of those options. Now, some of us are moved by words, others are moved by music. And I will join the choir here in a moment to share a musical version of what I just read, a song called The Crowded Table. It is written by the Highwomen. It's a female artist's response to the Highwaymen, that some of you may remember. So please join me, choir. is always open, your picture's on my wall. Everyone's a little broken, and everyone belongs. Yeah, everyone belongs.
I want a house with a crowded table and a place by the fire for everyone. Let us take on the world while we're young and able, and bring us back together when the day is done. And bring us back together when the day is done. When the day is done.
Thank y'all. I talked to Elaine a few weeks ago about using this song, and then I found the reading that Dave provided, and it just flows so well together, didn't it? And I'm going to continue lifting up different ideas about radical hospitality. There are a number of traditions, both Judeo-Christian, Unitarian, Universalist, Muslim, and others, that lift up this idea of hospitality, of welcoming the stranger. And so I am going to reference some scriptures today, which might not be something that you're all as familiar with me doing in these spaces. But I think it's important for us to recognize the both and of having folks that are here that have had harm from other religious traditions weaponizing scriptures, and we have UUs that are Christian or also sometimes referred to as Jesus followers that are here and part of our congregation. And I also want to name that I have a few longer quotes because there were lots of readings and things that I looked at today, and I had a really hard time narrowing it down. Do y'all ever have that problem? Yeah. So the first quote comes from Christine Valler's Printer. Let all guests who arrive to be received like Christ, for he is going to say, I was a stranger, and you welcomed me, which comes from Matthew 25:35. There's a quote from Benedict's rule that is foundational to the expression of the principle of hospitality at work. I'm called to welcome in every stranger who comes to the door as the face of the divine. I love the invitation of this rule. I consider what it means at the foundation, that everything that seems strange, foreign, or uncomfortable is the place where God especially shimmers forth. Instead of being able to say that God appears only in what is familiar, only in the people who make me feel comfortable and safe and look like me, hospitality calls us to extend ourselves, to risk. This piece reminded me of the sermon given by Bishop Buddy at the National Cathedral on Inauguration Day prayer service. She spoke truth to power. She did not back down in asking the sitting president of the United States, pleading with him to show mercy, lifting up biblical connections of how we can create unity through justice and mercy and welcoming the stranger. She quoted from Leviticus 33 through 34, which speaks of how we should treat the stranger, or in other translations, the foreigner or alien, saying that you should not do harm and to even love them as yourself, because you were once strangers. This verse isn't just about mercy. It calls for us to treat others as ourselves. And I want to pause here to name that Leviticus has other parts that are often, by Christian nationalists and other groups, that are weaponized around sexuality and sorcery and the ways that people have been harmed by these verses. And there's this verse in Leviticus 2 about welcoming the stranger. And it might sound a little familiar, if any of you are familiar with Mark 12, in which Jesus answers the question about what laws are the most important. The first being to love your God to love your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all of your strength. And then the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, this is a radical idea if you really think about it, because one, it means we have to love ourselves, and it means that we need to treat others, even if we don't agree with them, with a measure of love that we hope to have for ourselves. And this doesn't always mean that we treat everybody exactly the same. Equality isn't equity. Being able to give someone something that they need, as the reading that Dave shared mentioned. Imagine you were someplace where you were the only person that looked like you or sounded like you, and how you would want to be received in that space. But this takes some radical hospitality in ourselves to offer that love to others. It takes being vulnerable, taking some risks. It requires moving beyond our comfort zone to offer radical hospitality and to love our neighbor as ourselves. There's a saying that I've heard many ministers in many denominations utter over the years, and maybe you've heard me say it too, is the role of the minister is to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. That requires a delicate balance, and asking of us to move beyond our comfort zone and ask for us to be there for one another, to create a community of care that doesn't invite people in, but makes space for and includes people on a deeper level. And that requires putting down some of our biases, implicit or explicit, because we have been raised in a culture, in communities, in families that shape what we do and what we believe. And actions can speak louder than words. The way we hold our bodies, the way we back up, the way we engage with someone in a physical space. And I want to refer back to this idea of disrupting our biases, moving beyond the status quo. how it prevents us from living more fully into the notion of beloved community. And authors Erica Hewitt and Julica Herman de la Fuente wrote in an article about this entitled Dismantling White Supremacy Culture in Worship. And now, I know there can be some discomfort for folks in hearing the words white supremacy culture. And it is the waters we are swimming in. It doesn't mean that us as individuals are white supremacists, because we're not marching with those guys. But we are steeped in a culture that engages who we are on a deeper level. And so a quote from their article is that the status quo is not radically inclusive. The status quo is not beloved community. The status quo is never going to get us free. Decentering the status quo is important both as a goal and as a process. If we're unable to change our liturgy, our expectations of worship, and how the container of worship is structured, how can we build our tolerance for decentering the status quo outside of worship? End quote. So while reading that, I must acknowledge that we still follow a very white Protestant model of doing church, and this service does the same. We're not going to make sweeping changes all at once and throw out everything that we've known, but we can make some changes. And as I mentioned last week, I invite you to move as you need to move your body, whether you need to stand or sit, knit or use a fidget toy, or you want to say something vocally during the service. I do ask that if you have a question, we need to make it brief so that I can repeat it, or I need to get a mic to you if it's longer. Because one of my favorite times during a service, as I mentioned to some of you before, is kid raising his hand in the middle of my sermon to ask me a question. Coming back to this idea of loving the stranger as ourselves doesn't mean that we maintain the status quo in doing so. It requires us to consider how we might feel going into a foreign situation, as I mentioned earlier. What works for one of us might not work for others. And there's a quote that I've provided before on the idea of normalcy. It's one of my favorites from Morticia Addams in the 90s Addams Family movies, in which she says normal for the spider is chaos for the fly. My normal might not look like yours. I spent years arranging myself at a table so that I could hear and see the most people, because I didn't get a hearing aid, even though I've had a hearing loss issue in my left ear my entire life. And even today, as Dave was talking to me, sitting on my left side, even with my hearing aid, 40 years of built-in ways that I respond to the world, I turned to him so that I could see him and his lips moving and hear him in my good ear. Some things are so ingrained in us that it is difficult for us to break free, even when we want to, even when we have devices that help us do things differently. Now, change can be difficult. Has anybody ever been uncomfortable when things change? Yeah. It can be very disconcerting. It can disrupt who and how and the ways we move in the world. But I would offer this. Change is the one constant that we can depend on as long as we are alive. Because for us to be alive, we are changing every second of every day. Which means we can change in other ways. We can learn and grow together. We can work towards building a diverse, beloved community in an ongoing, unfolding, challenging of the status quo and making for spiritual wholeness, making space for us to bring our whole selves without the expectation that we fit into what is already there. So, are some of you familiar with our opening hymn, Come, Come, Whoever You Are? So, you might notice, if you look in the hymnal, that it's attributed to Muslim Sufi poet Ramy. Now, this isn't exactly accurate. Some part of it can be connected to a poem, but the translation was terrible that this refers to. So the meaning is there in this song, however. To come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. There is value in these words and singing them. And I have a question for you. Do you think we really, really mean them and live into them? Sometimes I heard whispered. Yes. So I think the important part of this is that we strive. We work towards, we aspire to live into songs like this. Our value statements and our principles call us to strive and give us examples of how to do that. Generosity is one of our values. It's to cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope, covenanting to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in our relationships of interdependence and mutuality. We are tied up in a garment weaving of mutuality. We are all connected in that great interdependence. And in creating space for that, it requires us a deeper understanding of pluralism, that we celebrate all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology, that we learn from one another in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, that we embrace our differences, our commonalities, with love, curiosity, and respect. We can't embrace our differences and commonalities of love, curiosity, and respect without a little bit of radical hospitality. So I invite us to lean into this understanding of radical hospitality as a way of embodying these values, to move us beyond a sense of just being welcoming into a place of celebration and inclusion, making space for everyone that crowded table, and making space by the fire for everyone. I wonder if that was an invitation to be there, or it was just open. Which, there's a quote by Russell Layman, that inclusion isn't about being invited to sit at someone else's table. It's about building a new table all together, where each person's voice and presence matter equally. The act of inviting often implies a subtle power dynamic, as if someone is granting permission to belong. But true belonging isn't something that can be granted. It's something that should emerge naturally from a shared understanding and mutual respect. So the question isn't just about who is included, but how we include, and also why we're including, end quote. So as I mentioned, I loved this song and asked Elaine to play it, or to have the choir perform it, rather. It speaks of being there for others in the first verse, about planting so growth can happen. Oh wait, the first verse is being there for others, planting, and then there's the third verse that I'm forgetting. The door is always open, that's right. And we'll take on the world while we are able. Want a house with a crowded table and room for everyone. While I can't explicitly say what the writers of this piece meant, I'd like to think that it means radical hospitality that literally makes space for everyone. And I have a final quote, if you'll bear with me for it, about preemptive radical inclusion by the Reverend C.B. Beale. Preemptive radical inclusion means that we challenge what we already believe, the systems that have worked for us and we enjoy, and lean into learning how other people experience those systems. We have to change. A sign that we are practicing preemptive radical inclusion is that we notice it is us that change. It is not a box for us to check off and say, we did this thing. Instead, it is a lifelong practice. It is not a thing to do, but a way to explore and to perceive. It is a way to examine privilege, to take on responsibility, to set aside control, and to work for justice. End quote. We are a justice-loving people. Who here either owns or has seen a t-shirt that has this slogan on it, siding with love or standing on the side of the love as the previous iteration? This is a way of going out into the world and providing public witness that we are siding with love. And it's really interesting to show up someplace and see a sea of them. And at times, it can feel like we focus too much on justice. And there are times in which we can't focus on just anything else, because they are inextricably linked. This idea of justice, I realized that I wrote a list that was about yay long of all the things that I think fall under the topic of justice. Earth justice, looking at getting solar panels, is part of justice work for our planet. Reproductive justice, LGBTQIA justice. The list really does go on. I won't stand here and tell you everything on that list at the moment. But sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, did I say sexism? So again, there's a long list. Part of seeking justice is resistance. And if you've heard me preach or were here for Reverend Ian Hill's service, resistance can look different ways. Resistance can look like rest when you need rest. Resistance can look like joy, and finding the joy in moments and not just the despair, the hope. Holding fast to hope, to not let others still our joy or our hope. There's a song that I love listening to and is on my regular rotation on my Spotify playlist of the world, called This Joy. This joy, the world didn't give it to me, and the world can't take it away. And it continues on with this love, this peace. The world didn't give it to me, and it can't take it away. Radical hospitality is a form of resistance. It is a spiritual practice that guides us to a space not just of being welcoming, but creating space for people to bring their whole selves, to honoring the call to love our neighbor or our stranger as ourselves, even when it is really difficult. To help create a sense of generosity through love, hope, gratitude, and mutuality. May we be guided through our love and compassion to create a space of radical hospitality. May we honor the beauty of our diversity, of being and believing. May it be so. May we make it so. And blessed be. You are now invited to rise in body, mind, or spirit wherever you are to join in singing number 360, Here We Have Gathered. And this one might not be as familiar, but we're going to give it a go. Y'all did great. As we leave this space today, may we consider how we embody radical hospitality, not just in these halls, but in all aspects of our life, how we can welcome the stranger as ourself. Invite you to go in peace and return in love.